My name is Mbunge. I'm the Stewardship Director at Langa Seventh-day Adventist Church. Such a privilege for us to be contributing to the COVID-19 conversation with a specific lens, looking at our sustainability, more specifically, actually the ecosystem in which we operate in, both for ourselves and as individuals, our communities, our churches, and the business community.
Okay. Thank you for that. Can you give us your experience so far, your personal experience about the COVID-19?
Certainly. I think that while COVID-19 took time to hit our shores and in this African context, but when it did, it seems like it moved so rapidly forward that we have been in this whirlwind of actually trying to navigate our spaces, our home economics, our personal finances, and the whole ecosystem that we operate in. So my experience has been that we have rapidly moved from a state of shock into a state of panic, whereby the socioeconomic factors moved so far forward, as well as the business community rapidly reacted. Some people have been personally affected, where you might have experienced a reduction or no income. And on another avenue, you might be the business owner who has had to look at the big picture and suddenly realize what a short lead time you have on your working capital in terms of cash. So I've seen a lot of decisions being taken and a lot of discomfort. And looking forward, there's still a healthy dose of uncertainty that is going around. Certainly improving the conversation is now us trying to, wrap our minds around what is hugely uncertain to what's possible, to what's doable, and to what's immediately actionable. So I think from that perspective and lens, certainly, I'm quite encouraged by the speed of agility and innovation within this sphere, because it has really just thrown us forward, where we have seen how adaptable we really are, and that is really comforting. And also, how do we calculate our next steps forward?
Okay, thank you. Can you talk to someone who is at home, working at home, and someone who is receiving his salary, nothing financially, he has not been affected? Can you talk to that someone who is a member of the church, and what can one do to support? Can you talk around that?
Absolutely. I think that, talking to somebody who is a believer, certainly, I will start off by, sharing a few thoughts that I'm quite fond of and I've seen come alive. And that is that whenever we are grappling with something bigger than us, or really challenging our core, what really comes to the fore is that it comes and tests our value system. Tests our value system in the kind of decisions that we make, given uncertainty and short lead time. And I think all of us have been affected by that, in terms of really, throwing a lot of questions that have to do with where are we going, how do we navigate that. So at the center that knits us all together, I think that one thing that we can rely on, that we can use as a point of departure, is to actually rehash. What are your personal values? What are your family values? What values are existing in your ecosystem? we've equally seen that in businesses, the value systems, the good values that are hanging on the walls have actually also been shaken. And the decisions that have emanated from there have either sent a strong message of authenticity on those values, or quite a questionable, state of mind as to what the real significance of those values are. Coming down to an individual perspective, I know that we're going to sketch a couple of scenarios and speak into different aspects of us being impacted by COVID. But the real shining thing that cuts across everything is the authenticity, the depth, and the regularity of your devotional life. I think it really has been how you have responded to this, or how you are interpreting uncertainty and personal discomfort, has got a lot to do with how grounded we are spiritually. And so one of the motivations that I would quickly bring on board is that that's the one thing that we need, that needs to anchor in all of our lives, that kind of like needs to center us all, and then everything else moves from there. I think that's the thing that we need to give texture into everything else that is around us. Your question speaks to somebody who is an employee and who has not been financially impacted in terms of a salary cut by the pandemic. The first thing I would think about is to understand from an economics perspective, where does your employer sit? What this means to them, because as soon as we understand that, we can understand the cosmic effect it will have on us when things either improve or deteriorate financially. And once those things have been unpacked, we are in a better position to actually react and respond. But now is the time where we're sitting on the brink of really opening up the whole of the economy in South Africa, and that means that we need to be on guard for unnecessary spending. The time is now where we need to, more than ever, exercise living way below our means. And I think that being on an aggressive lockdown, as such as we have been, we have really been launched forward in that sphere, whereby we really are minimalistic to a large degree. So the opening up of the economy, the thirst that has been there to get out there, to interact in whatever shape or form, might pose a risk in terms of consumerism. Because now that we can spend hours at a shopping mall, does not necessarily mean that we need to. We need to be quite careful and selective about every rand, in the sense that we do spend, asking us, a critical question as to its necessity. So what do I mean in a nutshell? I think what I'd like to really emphasize is an agile budgeting system, whereby you've got a scenario planning forward, you also have got your reality that are moving from a month to month. And therefore, building your personal buffer or your family buffer is the critical thing to do. And really that is the same of savings. And it's also on the form of actually looking forward and anticipating how your role as an employee is going to be impacted by COVID. Is it digitized enough? Is it going to be digitized? Do you need to learn a new skill? Do you need to invest personally into yourself being adaptable and continued being marketable on the market? Is one of the few things that we need to grapple with. And the time is now. The time is now to get out there, and once you've decided which way to go, to start exploring those alternatives and weighing in on your personal investment.
Okay, thank you for that. I was asking also this same question in relation to stewardship and the commitment when you are having your full salary. How do you go about what must you do that under this lockdown, because there's no church to go where I would normally go and offer.
Thank you for that question. I think, you know, we have always been encouraged from our conference perspective to migrate to a digital solution. This is where we have been returning tithe and offering via bank transfers, direct deposits, etc., and really migrating the whole ecosystem into a cashless society. So I think that for people who have already been there in terms of electronic funds, that's commendable. So for the person who has been left behind or has not really elected that as their elected, then it's time to do that. Just that we are fortunate that our conference is digitally enabled enough to allow us to be able to do that. We don't need a physical structure for us to be able to remain faithful. Remaining faithful is a symptom that flows out of the value system and actually your relationship with Christ himself. So that stronghold will not really negatively impact on your ability to remain faithful and financial planning from a conference perspective. I just want to use this time to reflect on something, to be able to draw a lesson that we can use. In the Western Cape, particularly 2 years ago, we had experienced one of the most severe droughts of all times. And what we quickly realized is that all of the different ministries, education, domestic environment, business community, public sector, everyone was on their business continuity plans and trying to say, in the event of a day zero, how we're going to move forward. The lesson that I've taken out of that crisis is that it really reflected into our interconnectedness as a community. Your business might have had it sorted out in terms of how they're going to ship in and ship out water, but if your clients hadn't had it sorted out, there's nobody to service. And therefore, if you're coming down one level to the domestic environment, you could have had it sorted out, but if your children's education system doesn't have it sorted out, then your kids cannot go to school. What does that mean for you being able to go to work? And you've got assistants at home, you know, you've got somebody who's helping you on the domestic environment, they're not sorted out. That means they can't come to work. They can't come look after your kids. You can't go to work, and so on. What's my point, essentially, is that we live in an interconnected society. Pause on that for a moment. Now think, and we take the lens and we put ourselves in the shoes of the different conferences that we are in. And certainly where we have seen a regression, an aggressive regression in terms of faithful return of tithe and offering, what does that mean for the conferences? Conference is, it's a juristic person. It's you can't touch and feel them. But what we can appreciate is that it's made up of pastors who are leaders of families, and so on. It trickles down. So therefore, if income of the conference is halved or cut into fifths, it does have a substantial impact on its ability to continue remunerating the pastors, and where there might be layoffs, then what does that mean for us back into the domestic environment? Because certainly this is not the time to take our foot off the clutch in terms of spiritual mentorship and leadership and guidance. So my encouragement is really coming from the sense of, let's put all hats on: domestic hat, business hat, macroeconomic hat, a conference hat on, and may that encourage us to remain faithful. Not because we're going to take stock and we're going to get a nice badge or pat on the back, but because that's our lifestyle. It emanates from our values, it emanates from who we are, it emanates how our relationship is with Jesus Christ himself.
Okay, thank you. For someone who's getting 50% to nothing during this time, salary has been cut, umntu ongenamali konke. onemali encinanana. What is the reason to tithe, and why must the person continue to give back to the church?
I think that's a fantastic question. And I'm going to just highlight my thread of thought from the beginning, because essentially, if we are to sketch or live our lives in such a manner that we are heavily influenced by our current factors or exterior factors, then the notion of faithfulness, it goes under the bus. So therefore, really what's essential to remember is that whenever we're talking about faithfulness, we are really speaking about a consistent. We're taking it from a principle perspective. Those principles are informed from our value system, and our value system is crafted around how Jesus would like us to lead out our lives. So in that context, nothing changes, But quite pertinently, you're asking the question of, what does it look like, or what's the point in continuing?
Yeah, because God must understand. That's the whole point. He understand, and he had led this COVID. So why he can't understand now that we can't?
Yeah. First and foremost, God has got certain, commandments and rules and structure that he operates in, that we have inherited, and therefore really what we need to understand is that our sustenance doesn't come from what is left after we had returned a faithful tithe and offering, because then we would always be spiritually poor. But the encouragement for me is that whatever is left after I have returned a faithful tithe, after I have offered, after I have helped here and there, is insignificant in the bigger scheme of things, because really God takes that nothingness, increase and multiplies it, and really launches us into abundance. Now, when we believe that, in terms of how God navigates himself in our particular context, that's exactly the faith aspect that we live in. And to ask the question ever so frequently as to what's the point, why doesn't God just understand or see the situation, limits the Lord himself. God can never be limited in terms of context and circumferences of where we are, but we, by remaining faithful, are actually speaking volumes into our life, into the life of all those around us, as to the omnipotence and the God, the provider, really looking out for us. Because if our faith is in our own ability to self-sustain, then there's really no room for faith.
Thank you for that. Any advice to that you can give to the conference of the church?
Issues of sustainability, specifically now financial sustainability from a conference perspective, weigh in heavily on stakeholder engagement. I think that where there is a clear vision backed by a communication strategy, because really people tend to take decision based on the availability or inavailability of communication. So taking the big daunting picture, breaking it down to size, breaking it down into scenarios, and breaking it down into actionable items is critical at this point to bring us all on board, to kind of realize where really authentically we are. So therefore, bolstering up on that is one of the critical strategies to actually be able to trigger a response that is somewhat positive from the membership base. I would like to congratulate the conference on its agility, of actually quite quickly adapting into a digital platform and launching itself forward, we have been spoiled rotten on choices and available resources that we could connect with. And certainly that then authentifies the relevancy of the conference as an intermediary in our spiritual life. And I think that's hugely encouraging.
Okay. Thank you so much.